Howdy, this is an introductory video on first-order predicate logic. We'll be covering terms, predicates, and common nouns as predicates. It's based on the textbook First Course in Mathematical Logic by Patrick Suppes and Shirley Hill. I'll be covering 3 sections here. It's mainly dealing with translations, so it's basic stuff, and let's begin. Let me just provide a basic outline of what we're going to be doing and a review of the last section. So we'll be starting predicate logic in this video. Now, in the last video, we saw how propositional logic is just too limiting. We found out that propositional logic only deals with the relations between atomic sentences, whereas in predicate logic, it allows us to deal with what's within a single so-called atomic sentence. So we'll be able to deal with a proposition such as all men are mortal, a proposition such as Socrates is a man, and a proposition such as Socrates is mortal. The categorical syllogism cannot be analyzed in propositional logic, but it can be analyzed in predicate logic. Now here's a basic outline. So we'll be dealing with 3 sections: terms, predicates, and common nouns as predicates. So it's a basic translation game here. Before we start translating, we better first think about terms, and a term, as you would suspect, refers to something. It can be a name, or it can be a description. Now, a name we'll simply define as that which refers to a particular individual thing or object or subject, whereas a description describes something. It describes the name. It tells us about it. It's really as simple as that. So let's look at some of the exercises. Exercise 2A, we're to list the terms in the following sentences. Number 1, this exercise is very easy. Well, certainly this exercise is a term, and by the way, a term can have more than one word in it, and very easy is a term. This exercise is a name, it's a particular individual thing, this exercise. Whereas very easy is a description, it's describing the subject. And by the way, this is a very common form of proposition, where you have the subject, which we can think of as a name, the so-called copula, which is the to be verb, such as is, or is not, or are not, and then the predicate, which we can think of just as the description. Now, while this is a very common form of proposition, it's not the only type that appears in predicate logic. In so-called categorical logic, in Aristotelian logic, this is the standard type of proposition where you have the subject, the copula, and the predicate. But in predicate logic, it turns out you can have more than one name in a given proposition, and we'll encounter that. Let's look at number 2. China is the most populous country in the world. Well, China, of course, is a term, it's a name, it's a particular place, and the most populous country in the world is a term, it's a description. Number 4 is a little different. We have 5 plus 4 equals 3 plus 6. We'll treat 5 plus 4 as a term, and 3 plus 6 as a term. The equal sign is kind of like the copula, kind of like the is. So we might think of it as 5 plus 4 is 3 plus 6. Number 8, Mike is the president of our class. Of course, Mike is, this is like in my stylus pen, sometimes gives me a little difficulties. Okay, so Mike is a name, of course, a particular person, and the president of our class is a description. So those are our 2 terms. But of course, you can have more than one name, and you can have more than 2 terms in a sentence. For exercise 2B, we're to list separately the terms which are names, we'll put those in blue, and those which are descriptions, we'll put that in green. Number 1, the African continent is larger than the North American continent. Well, the African continent is certainly a name, it's describing a particular, well, it's naming a particular place, but also we have the North American continent referring to a particular place, so it's also a name. How about number 2, the square root of 25 is 5. Here, we'll treat 5 as a name, a particular number, and as the subject, and we'll treat the square root of 25 as a description. It's describing our subject, it's describing our name. Number 9, the Andes are the longest mountain chain in the world. Of course, the Andes is a particular place, it's a name, and then we have the longest mountain chain in the world as the description. How about number 10? We have 11 plus 11 equals 10 plus 12. Well, if we're going to be consistent with number 2, we'll treat 11 plus 11 as a description and 10 plus 12 as a description. Section 5.3 of the Suppes and Hill textbook is on predicates. And as you know, a sentence has a subject and a predicate, where the predicate describes the subject. The subject names something, whereas the predicate describes that something. Now, by convention, symbolically, we let the predicate be a capital letter, and we let the subject be a lowercase letter. Moreover, by convention, symbolically, the predicate always goes first, and the subject goes second. Now note that you can't have more than one name in predicate logic, so it's not always going to be the case where you just have a simple subject-copula-predicate relation. You may have more than one lowercase letter attach itself to a single predicate. In that case, you would have more than one name. And a name, as you know, refers to a particular individual thing. But here we're just keeping things simple and building up to what's more complicated. For exercise 3A, we just want to know what the complete predicate is in each of the following sentences. Number 3, we have Tom scores. Well, Tom is the subject and scores is our predicate. It's talking about Tom. Number 4, the first game is ending quickly. The first game is the subject, ending quickly is the predicate. Number 6, we have walking at the front is the chancellor. Well, in this case, chancellor is definitely the subject. So walking at the front is the predicate. Number 13, the temperature climbs steadily. The temperature is the subject, climb steadily is the predicate. For exercise 3B, we're going to symbolize. So we'll first take note of what the predicate is and then what the name is. Of course, the predicate goes first with a capital letter, and then the name goes second as a lowercase letter. Number 2, we have the crowd dispersed quietly. Well, the crowd is the subject or the name, where dispersed quietly is the predicate. So we'll have, for the predicate, we'll represent that with the capital letter D, and for the subject, lowercase c for crowd. Number 3, a faint breeze stirred. Well, faint breeze is our subject, and stirred is our predicate. So we'll translate this as capital S for our predicate and lowercase b for our subject. For 6, we have Susan walks gracefully. Susan is the subject, and the predicate is walks gracefully. So we'll have capital W for the predicate and little s, lowercase s for the subject. Number 12, we have John's horse jumps faultlessly. So John's horse is the subject, jumps faultlessly is the predicate. So we'll have capital J for the predicate, jumps, and we'll have little h for the subject of horse. Number 14, the sun was high overhead. The sun is the subject, high overhead was the predicate. So we'll have capital H for the predicate, and we'll give it a little s for our name or our subject. Now, a nice thing about the Suppes and Hill textbook is that it doesn't overwhelm the reader. It doesn't overwhelm me, and it won't overwhelm you. Everything is broken down step by step. It doesn't throw at the reader a ton of information at once that we need to absorb and understand in its entirety right away. So, Everything is step by step. Rather than very complex lessons, the textbook breaks things up into smaller and simpler ones. And that's one of the reasons that I chose that as the basis to this series of videos. Another is simply that the book is very old. That's another reason. But anyways, section 5.4 is on common nouns as predicates, and common nouns are often predicates, but not always. For example, the classic example, Socrates is a man. And man, of course, is a common noun. It's not the name of a particular person or object. Socrates belongs to the class of mankind or men. So let's do some exercises. Exercise 4C. What are the common nouns in the following sentences? Number 1, Jay is a student. Well, definitely it's student, and that happens to be a predicate in this case. So Jay is a student. Student is a predicate. It describes the subject, namely Jay. Number 2, blue and yellow are complementary colors. Here, colors is the common noun, and those colors happen to be, in particular, blue and yellow. Number 7 is Tom's father is an engineer. Well, here we have two common nouns. One of them is father, and the other one is engineer. So father, it's not a predicate here, it's the subject. Tom's father is the subject, and of course engineer is the predicate. For exercise 4D, basically we just want to know, is a given common noun a predicate or not? So let's just continue. Number 5, these volumes are reference books. Sorry for the typo. These volumes are reference books. Volumes is our common noun, but it's not a predicate, part of the subject. And likewise, for number 6, his plan worked perfectly. So we have plan as our common noun, but it is part of the subject. It's not a predicate. Number 12, his package is being delivered now. Again, we have the common noun, package, as part of the subject, not the predicate. Number 13, your phone is ringing. Of course, phone is our common noun and is not a predicate. So a common noun is often a predicate, but it also could just be part of the subject, as those examples showed. I did make one mistake. For number 5, I forgot to say books is also a common noun. In that case, that common noun does happen to be a predicate. So sorry about that. But let's continue with exercise 4E. And here, we just really want to find the subject. Number 1, 2 plus 2 is equal to 3 plus 1. In this case, I suppose, it's a little bit just a matter of interpretation what we want to treat as a subject. But by default, it's probably best to have the first term here, 2 plus 2, as a subject versus 3 plus 1. Number 4, Mary is waiting patiently. Here, it's pretty obvious what the subject is. It's Mary. Number 5, 5 times 6 equals 30. It's a little bit open to interpretation if we want to treat 30 as the subject versus 5 times 6. So in previous slides, we would have treated 30 as the subject. But to me, it wouldn't be wrong to say 5 times 6 is the subject. You could have that as a subject, like why not? So there's a little bit of wiggle room. But anyways, number 7, this rose is a fragrant flower. Of course, this rose will be the subject. Exercise 4F. Here, we're back to symbolizing. So let's do that. So number 1, we have Bill is a member of the club. So Bill is a subject, and member of the club is the predicate. So for the predicate, we'll say this big C, and the subject will have little b. Number 5, we have this table is round. This table is the subject, round is the predicate. So we'll symbolize this as capital R for round, and we'll say little t for table. One more exercise, and we'll be doing some symbolizing. This time we'll have 2 atomic sentences that are joined by a connective. Number 1, if Jane is tall, then Susan is small. So we have 2 atomic sentences. The first atomic sentence is Jane is tall. The second atomic sentence is Susan is small. And they are joined together by conditional. Tall is the predicate. Jane is the subject. We have a conditional, so we have an arrow. Susan is the subject. Small is the predicate, so big S for small is the predicate, and little s for the subject, Susan. Number 2, Karen is late or Ruth is early. We have a disjunction. Karen is late. Late is the predicate, so big L. Karen is a subject, so small k. Or Ruth is early. Early is the predicate, and Ruth is a subject, so big E, little r. Number 3, Euboea is a Greek island, and Crete is a Greek island. We have a conjunction. Big G for the predicate of Greek island. Little e for the subject, and we have the same exact predicate, so another big G, and a little c for the subject. Number 9, Buddhism is a religion that originated in India, but it became more widespread in China. The but, in this case, we have to interpret as an and. Wouldn't make sense to interpret as a conditional or a disjunction or an if and only if. So, and is how we have to interpret it. The predicate is a religion that originated in India with the first atomic sentence. We'll just give that an I, so capital I, and the subject is Buddhism, so a little b. So big I, little b, and it became more widespread in China. So China we'll use to symbolize that predicate. So big C, and the subject remains the same, so little b. Number 10, if Larry is here, then this meaning can begin. It's conditional. Our first atomic sentence is Larry is here. So here is the predicate, so big H, and we'll have a little L for Larry as a subject. We have our arrow for conditional. This meaning can begin. We'll have B, capital B for the predicate, and little m for the subject of meaning. And finally, number 11, John will win if and only if he trains every day. We have a biconditional. Will win is the predicate, so we'll have big W. John is the subject, so we'll have little j. It's a biconditional, so we have the arrow that goes both ways. Trains every day is a predicate, so we'll have big T for the predicate, and the subject is still John, so we'll have little j. And that's all for this video. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Up next is section 5.5, Atomic Formulas and Variables. I might include another section, I'm not sure yet, but at least 5.5 is up next. And I'll see you soon.